Well, it's an interesting start to the show. We've got an old-fashioned NFC West showdown as the 49ers travel to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. Seattle is playing their third game in 11 days. They're a 3.5-point home dog. Can Seattle turn around their recent failures against San Francisco? And maybe more importantly, can San Francisco turn around their division failures, which is usually their strength? We've got it all for you in the Pregame Power-Up on DK Network, and it starts now. And we are ready for week 6 of the NFL season. I'm glad you're with us. Hi, everybody. Welcome into the Pregame Power-Up, presented by Campbell's Chunky. It is soup that eats like a meal, and we've got a buffet tonight. Claudia Bellafato is here. Marshall Newhouse will join us. Emerson Lasado will join us. Mike Pritchard will join us from the DraftKings 4 in Las Vegas. And, you know, we've had a real issue lately with what's going on with San Francisco. They are 0-2 in division games this year, Claudia. They were 11-1 inside the division the last 2 seasons, but this could be a get-right game.
Also, keep in mind, 10-point leads in the fourth quarter of those games, and they just dropped the ball, literally and figuratively. That being said, the market doesn't care. Bookmakers don't care. The market doesn't care. They are the favorite, opened a 3-point favorite, got pushed to 3.5. And that might not sound like much, but 3 is a key number, so that is rather significant. And you look at what Seattle has done, 1-7 in the last 8 games against the spread. We'll talk about a ton of trends when it comes to Seattle. And what doesn't really help them? A ton of defensive injuries. We'll get to them. I mean, you can look at the list. There's a lot to call out, but Byron Murphy's one of them, defensive tackle, corner Tariq Woolen, and linebacker Uchenna Nwosu. Those are the 3 biggest that we now know officially out, and those are among a lot of other questionables. Jake Moody, you see for San Francisco. That's important. He's a kicker, but when it comes down to a game that could be close and land on a 3, Jake Moody out is important for San Francisco.
Yeah, and you see those injuries piling up, too, when you talk about the fact that this is their third game in 11 days. That is also somewhat problematic for the Seattle Seahawks. But of course, we're talking about problems for the San Francisco 49ers that we haven't seen over the last couple of seasons. They lost another game inside the division on Sunday. It was a Kazir White interception of Brock Purdy that sealed that 1-point win, 24-23 for the Cardinals in Week 5. Arizona handed San Francisco their 3rd loss of the season, and they've become the first team since the 1988 Broncos to have a losing record through their first 5 games, despite being at least a 4-point favorite in every one of those games. However, our power-up players look at the Niners' futures because this might be the time to buy low on this squad. Here's a look at how the odds have shifted for the Niners since opening. And here's the key. Slow starts are nothing new for Shanahan squads. The 49ers are 28-38 in weeks 1 through 9 under Kyle since 2017, and 20 over 500, 38-18 from week 10 on. And let us not forget, it was just a couple of years ago that the 49ers started 3-4 and then ripped off 12 straight wins to win the division and make it to the NFC Championship game before they played that game literally without any quarterbacks when Brock Purdy hurt his elbow. And speaking of hurt 49ers, obviously a big one that's been missing has been Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey has not played a down this season, as he's dealing with tendonitis, Achilles tendonitis in both of his legs. It looks like they may have him back for week 7, but Kyle Shanahan continues to express that this is very much a day-to-day and week-to-week thing. And when you look at the numbers, here's what's interesting. You'd think, oh, no, McCaffrey, running game's really an issue. Not really. Look at what they've done as Jordan Mason has filled in admirably. He has the most rushing yards for a 49ers player through 5 team games of a season in franchise history. And yes, that surpasses McCaffrey's total from last year. Where they do miss him, though, is inside the red zone. McCaffrey's 18 red zone touchdowns last season was tied for the NFL lead. This season, San Francisco is 30th in red zone touchdown percentage after going 1 for 6 in week 5. So yes, the red zone is an issue, the rushing game isn't, but the loss of McCaffrey is really impacting Brock Purdy. Without McCaffrey, he has an outlet, a safety valve. Brock has been holding onto the ball longer than any other quarterback in the NFL. We'll get to this with Marshall Newhouse in a bit. Over 3 seconds, 3.15 seconds from snap to throw. That's the longest by any quarterback this season. And this week, Purdy broke down exactly why he's been holding on to the ball this long.
For me, I still go about my progressions and everything just like I have the last couple of years with our offense and our system. You know, I'm not going into a game going, all right, I'm going to hold on to the ball longer here and try to make something happen. It's how can I be efficient, help out the O-line, get the ball out of my hands, and do my job. So, but the teams that we've played, the schemes that we've played, I guess they've done some of that where they're dropping more back in the zone and making me go through my progression, and turns out I'm holding on to the ball. So.
All right, so let's take a look at Purdy through first 5 games this season as opposed to last. Passing stats are up, more completions, attempt and passing yards than last year, but he's been less efficient for sure. Lower completion percentage, more interceptions. Through 5 games last season, Purdy had his team undefeated and was an MVP favorite, and this year, as we told you, they are 2-3. Claudia.
Well, looking at trends, right? This is first in trend. We're going to mention a lot of trends during the show, Trey, but this specifically, we're just going to title, "Oh no, Geno," because if you look at everything, it's all negative. 0-5 straight up as a starter on Thursday. The only quarterback who was worse, Daniel Jones. 3-10 straight up at night. So he likes the sun, I guess. 3-9 straight up on short rest, 4-8 ATS as an underdog in the last 12. None of these trends are good. Now, we know how good this Niners defense is, and that might be tough if Geno is facing a lot of pressure. He's been throwing the ball a lot. We just talked about Purdy doing so, but Geno has. This squad right now has the highest called pass rate in the NFL this year at 71.4%. Geno leading the NFL in passing yards and attempts. This is a stark contrast to their identity all those years under Pete Carroll. The key to a Seattle victory, well, maybe give the ball to Kenneth Walker. Yes, get back to the run game. Last week in a loss to the Giants, Walker had only 5 carries for 19 yards, but he led the team with 7 catches. In his career with Seattle, the team is just 6-10 when he does not play or gets fewer than 10 carries. And in the 23 games he's had 10 or more, they're 15-8. Seattle seems to be recognized as this because they talked this week about getting the ball back in the hands of their best back.
Got to get the ball to Kenmore. And I think we had plenty of run game in the plan. Didn't have anything to do with not having enough calls for that, just didn't get it called. And for us, you know, we leaned on the wrong thing. And I think if we get Ken 10 more touches, 15 more touches, things are going to look different. So that's 100% on me. And my job is to make sure I get all our guys in the best position possible to win the game, and I didn't do that.
Grubb's going to call the game according to what he sees. Obviously, you know, it's always important to be balanced and to take advantage of all the weaknesses in the defense. But, you know, our running game has got to be the defining factor for our offense. And I think as we go along throughout the season, obviously the, pass run numbers, they tend to balance up. But, we definitely want to run the ball. We definitely want to be physical up front. We want to set the tone that way. And we need those guys. We got great running backs. We got great linemen. And we got to continue to rely on those guys.
So they're realizing the obvious. That's good. Use one of your more explosive backs. Kenneth Walker, if you like him to have a big night, take a look at his props. In the last 10 games between the two squads, the team that has rushed for more yards is 9-1 straight up and 7-3 against the spread, Trey.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when you see how pass-heavy this offense has become.
Yeah.
I mean, that is not the way they want to handle this. It's sort of been by necessity. In case you're wondering, when was the last time a Seahawks quarterback led the league in passing yards? The answer would be never. It's never happened. And what do we really know about this Seattle team right now? Because they look great against inferior quarterback play, and then when they played somewhat more legitimate quarterbacks, that pass defense really didn't hold up.
Yeah, that on the defensive side, but on the other side too, if they lose in the trenches, they lose this game. And you look at the pressure that Geno has faced. He's been sacked the second amount of time, so that's great. He's throwing the ball, but he's also facing a ton of pressure. If they're able to take that away and they're not feeding Kenneth Walker like they said they would, they're in trouble tonight.
All right, so for more on this game tonight and what these two teams are, let's bring in the next member of our team. You, of course, know him as an offensive lineman who played a bunch of years in the NFL, Marshall Newhouse. He still doesn't like the Beef Hammer name, but I'm sticking with it. Marshall, as you look at these two teams, Seattle started 3-0, then they dropped a couple of games. San Francisco's sort of been all over. They kind of gave that game away to the Cardinals with a couple of late turnovers. What are your concerns for both of these squads heading into this matchup tonight?
Yeah, I think on both sides, it's kind of the injury bug that's hit them in different parts of their team. With San Francisco, obviously with the major players on their offense, with Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel at times, and then with Seattle, their defensive front has been just decimated, and that's led directly to the lack of their defenses, tackling and actual production on the field, especially from a vaunted defensive head coach in Mike Macdonald. So I think injuries, getting these guys healthy and getting to some consistent level of play, because this division is always a really hard-fought division, but they're giving up games that are very, very winnable.
Marshall, you mentioned McCaffrey, and we said at the top of the show, it hasn't really mattered in the sense that Mason just took over and exploded, but as a team, they're 2-4 without him, 22-5 with him. How have you seen this offense change without McCaffrey on the field?
Listen, I want to make sure everyone's giving Jordan Mason his flowers, because he's been running the ball admirably. He runs hard as a really dynamic player, but he is truly just not Christian McCaffrey. I think on the running front, the yards per carry, the actual production there most of the time, he's kind of neck and neck. But you see the stark difference in 20-plus yard runs that Jordan Mason has on McCaffrey, but it's the 40-plus yard runs that Christian McCaffrey this time last year has had more of. And really the home run hitting of Christian McCaffrey. And then the diversity, out of the backfield pass catching, lining them up just in the slot, running normal routes. You guys mentioned in the red zone their lack of their production. That directly correlates. Christian McCaffrey is a matchup nightmare. You're allowed to keep the same quote-unquote personnel packages on the field and just move them around like a chessboard. So Jordan Mason doesn't have all those tools in his bag. He's run the ball admirably, but there is just no one like Christian McCaffrey. That's the reason they traded for him. That's the reason they paid him.
Yeah, and that's the reason he was the Offensive Player of the Year last season. Let's look at the other offense now, Marshall. And we mentioned the stats and how pass-heavy they've become with Geno Smith. But in reality, is that the way Seattle wants to run this offense?
Yeah, I mean, the offensive coordinator, Ryan Grubb, said so this offseason. He said that they wanted the run game to be their bread and butter. And through this part of the season, it's just not that at all. They're dead last in actual called design runs, which is wild for that to come out of your mouth in the offseason, and then through week 5 to be the results. Listen, Geno Smith has been a great resurgence project. I love his game so far, but he's throwing the ball entirely too much. You're putting too many drop back passes on this offensive line, which is just not holding up so far. Last game, I think he believed he was sacked 7 times and hit 10 times. And so, yeah, they've got to get Kenneth Walker going. And what does that do? It feeds their play action game, which Geno, I believe, is really, really deadly at. You get Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, and Jackson Smith and Jigba involved, but so far they're so one-dimensional. We talk about this over and over again. When teams just don't believe you're a threat on the other part of the offense, they're just dialing their entire look to that. And what they'll end up doing is making you a really vanilla one-dimensional team.
Simple football, right? You don't have to play football to know. If you rely on one part of the game, defenses are going to know how to scheme. You talked about it. The Giants sacked him 7 times last week. Second highest sack, right behind Deshaun Watson. Seattle allowing the quickest time to pressure, all of these because of what you just said. How much of that is a concern tonight against this 49ers front?
Yeah, it's a huge concern. This 49ers front does like to get after the passer. I think they're not performing up to their normal standards, but they've put themselves in position to win the game. I mean, they're up 23-10 last week and had a hard time closing it out, but they absolutely get after the passer. And so Seattle hit really well on 2 young tackles. One's playing well in Charles Cross. The other side has had some injury bugs at right tackle. And so, yeah, that is something that San Francisco is dialed in. And it's not about strictly sacks. It's about making the quarterback uncomfortable, being in his area with hits and pressures. And Geno Smith can get the ball out as quick as he wants all day, but if there's not a run game to make these defensive linemen think about something as they're getting off the ball, they're just going to pin their ears back all day.
So with all that factoring in, Marshall, how do you see this game playing out tonight?
I have a hard time voting against San Francisco. They're not at full strength, but I believe they're putting things together. They're ahead in these games with the chance to win. I'll take San Francisco.
Yeah, I just can't believe they're going to fall to 0-3 in the division this early. We'll see what happens. Marshall, we'll check back to you a little bit later on in the show, but we got lots more to talk about here on the Pregame Power Up. It was Salaleta this week for the Jets head coach. Thank you, Claudia. Thank you. And what does that mean? What does that mean for the Jets going forward? Does it change anything? Pregame Power Up is presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal. Welcome back to the Pregame PowerUp, presented by Campbell's Chunky. It's soup that eats like a meal. And it was a parting gift, I guess, for Robert Saleh. He was canned, axed, let go, said goodbye on Tuesday after that 2-3 start. Saleh said he was blindsided by the decision. It was the first time during Woody Johnson's tenure as the owner that he made a coaching change midseason. Now, defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich was named interim head coach. And his first major decision, stripping Nathaniel Hackett, Aaron Rodgers' guy, of his play calling duties and giving the job to quarterback coach Todd Downing. Now, Saleh finishes with a record of 20-36 in New York. That's the worst winning percentage by a Jets head coach, with a minimum of 40 games within the organization. There had been plenty of speculation since the firing about how much or how little involvement Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback, had in this. And remember, there were reports that Saleh was thinking about firing Nathaniel Hackett. And then we did have the conversation that Woody Johnson said he had with Aaron Rodgers Monday night before the firing Tuesday. But did Rodgers have any influence or input? On the Pat McAfee show, Aaron Rodgers said absolutely not.
As far as any of the ridiculous allegations out there, I'm not going to spend more than one sentence in response to it, and that is that I resent any of those accusations because they're patently false. And it's interesting the amount of power that people think that I have, which I don't. But I love Robert, and it was, one of those days yesterday.
I mean, you did miss mandatory minicamp for a trip to Egypt.
No power, no power.
No power. So anyway, so what does the firing mean for the Jets' futures? Literally nothing, according to the DK Sportsbook. The odds did not move at all after Saleh was let go, and that might tell you something about what the Sharps think is the real problem in New York. For more on the fallout from the Jets' decision, here's Emerson Lazio.
Thank you so much, Trey. I am very excited now to introduce one of my best friends, former GM in the NFL. Which, hold on, which is why his show here on DK Network is called the GM Shuffle. Michael Lombardi, how are you?
Yeah, that's true. It is called the GM Shuffle. The best friends part, I'm not sure we go there, but look, we got a segment to do, so I'll work from here.
That is true. I do have some loving texts from you. I have receipts, so don't go fibbing on us now. Okay.
Right.
Let's bring it down a notch here because people are sad, or maybe some are excited in New York. The timing of this Robert Saleh firing by the Jets, how much sense does it make to you?
None. I mean, look, Robert Saleh wasn't a good coach at the conclusion of last year. I think he had a 34% win percentage going into this season, and he won 2 games. He did nothing in 5 games to demonstrate that he wasn't the same coach that he was last year. So why did you wait 5 games? You should have, if you didn't like him then, why do you like him now?
Yeah, and Aaron Rodgers isn't really used to losing a whole lot in his career, at least in the regular season, Michael. How involved do you think he was in this decision to part ways with Robert Saleh?
This is 0. Because
Zero?
if anybody knows Woody Johnson, they know that Woody's his own person. He's not going to talk to the players. He's not soliciting opinions. He makes his own mind up. Just like if he would have talked to somebody would have said, look, why don't you give the guy this game against Buffalo before we fire him? If he would have conferred with anybody, they would have derailed him from making this decision. Or frankly, if he would have conferred with anybody, he should have fired him after the Denver game. He's his own person. Rodgers had nothing to do with this. It's really just a bad narrative because Woody makes his own mind up. Woody probably didn't like Robert Saleh, although when I say that, why didn't he fire him at the end of last year?
Yeah, Woody knows what Woody likes and doesn't appear Woody really liked Robert Saleh there, Michael. As for who could be roaming the sidelines next, be honest with me here. How much do you think Bill Belichick would consider taking this job if offered? Come on.
Well, I can't speak for Bill, so I don't know.
Well,
I mean, I think a lot would have to be, I think a lot would have to be discussed between ownership and Bill before he would entertain it. And those discussions I'm not privy to. So look, to me, If I were Woody Johnson, that would be the first phone call I would make, and I would be the second phone call I would make, and I would stay after Bill until I could get a sit-down meeting with him. But I'm not Woody, so I have no idea.
Yeah, because you know Bill Belichick well. Like, that guy loves Aaron Rodgers, doesn't he?
Well, yeah, I think Aaron Rodgers, but there's a reason. I think what you missed the boat on, like a lot of boats you miss, is the fact that this team's 34% win percentage. This isn't about just one coach coming in and changing it, as great of a coach as he is. There's some institutional issues within the framework of that building that are real problematic.
I have one more for you. How hard should they go after Davante Adams? Should they go and try to pluck him from Vegas, bring him, reunite him with Aaron?
You know, I think, look, that they've given up a third-round pick in 2026 for a player who's not even on their campus. Robert Saleh and Hassan Reddick never even met. They never shook hands. So they've already got that one wasted. I can't imagine that they're going to do it. Look, Woody Johnson controls the money in the franchise, and it's going to take somewhere above $12 million to acquire Davante Adams plus an asset. I don't know if the Jets are in position to do that, because if they don't win this year, now you have a 41-year-old quarterback, and where is your team?
Okay. So then where do you see Davante being traded to?
I don't know where that is.
Okay.
I think there's certainly contenders, but I think what happened the other day where the Raiders, Antonio Pierce came out and said, look, you know, he's going to play here no matter once he heals his hamstring, if there's no trade that we like, he's playing here. I think that was all propaganda. He has to say that because the value that they're getting back on those phone calls isn't what they want.
All right, my man. I know you said I miss a lot of boats, but, you know, I feel like I caught this one. Really good one with you here. It was great catching up. I miss you. You're thriving on the GM Shuffle, by the way, which airs before Pregame PowerUp on Mondays and Thursdays. I'm proud of you, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you. I just hope I can have a career after this. I really do. Thank you.
Knock it off. Knock it off. We have important people watching this show. Michael, appreciate it. Coming up in this show, I'm actually going to go back on the timeline a little bit. We're going to kind of see who's played for the Jets before and kind of moved on and found more success. I'm also going to change my sweatshirt here because wardrobe changes mean that this show is a big deal. Trey, back to you.
Emerson, thanks. Let's just not have a wardrobe malfunction
like
we had at the Super Bowl a few years back. That would be great. Okay, so taking a look at who the DK Sportsbook think will be the next man in charge for the Jets. Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson, the current favorite. Then there's Texans OC Ben Slowick. After that, Mike Vrabel. I like Vrabes as a head coach, a lot of plus 500, and all the way down to plus 2,000, Bill Belichick. All right, just a couple of things here before we move on that I think we need to discuss about that interview with Mike Lombardi. When he said Woody doesn't talk to players, he talked to Aaron Rodgers Monday night, right? I don't know what was said, and they said they didn't talk about it. That's fine.
Right.
He talked to a player Monday night, and it was the same player who said in a post-game press conference, well, maybe how about we hold people accountable, which was a direct shot at Robert Saleh. So you can put those dots together any way you want. And the idea of Bill Belichick being the next head coach. Bill ran away from the Jets 24 years ago.
Yeah,
that is not happening, okay? And Bill was ready to move on from Tom Brady when Tom Brady was still at his peak. I don't think he wants to inherit a 41-year-old quarterback who will be 41 in December on a team that has 28 expiring contracts. That's not how you build a franchise.
That is true. From the outside looking in, though, not caring at all about the Jets, you look at what they were able to do last season with Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle under center. You had Garrett Wilson, who was really a top 10, top 15 receiver. Breece Hall was right up there, top 15 in terms of rush yards and you know, progress on the ground. The defense was top 5. Everybody was saying they're a quarterback away from winning a Super Bowl. So now you pluck the coach out. How much is the coach really mattering, or is it a problem of the players? Is it a problem of the quarterback? You had Garrett Wilson going on show saying, yeah, the offense is a little vanilla, and that was a direct shot at Aaron Rodgers.
Look, here's the deal, okay? Through the first 5 games last year, they scored 93 points. With Aaron Rodgers under center, you know how many points they scored through the first 5 games? 93 points.
Yeah.
So for more on this, let's go back to Marshall here. Marshall, look, you played with Aaron Rodgers, and we'll get to that in a little bit, and you've had Todd Downing as your offensive coordinator. But with the numbers that we've talked about, okay, the offense has been the same, whether it's Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle, Aaron Rodgers, etc. Hasn't changed. The odds haven't changed at the sportsbook since Robert Saleh was canned. And you look at Aaron Rodgers' completion percentage this year is 26th. Rookies Caleb Williams and Bo Nix are completing more passes this year than Aaron Rodgers. Did this timing of this move make any sense to you?
Well, no, it hasn't made sense for the last couple of years because all we've heard are murmurings of dissatisfaction, underperformance, your star quarterback not being satisfied. So it didn't make sense. And as people have alluded to, if you felt this way and if it didn't feel like it was heading in the right direction, why even wait in 5 games into the season? Right. So I get they wanted a healthy Aaron Rodgers back to see how things would go. It's gone pretty horribly so far. But listen, Robert Saleh is a great defensive coach. I think there are issues and concerns maybe as him as a head coach for now. We've seen guys later in their years kind of figure out the CEO nature of being a head coach. But as a defensive coach, he's been pretty stellar. Their performance has been okay, good enough to win in this league, which is more than a lot of teams can say. But his hiring and how things function within the building that we don't know 100% are what's at question. And so if you're Woody Johnson, down to Joe Douglas, we have to question your decision making. We have to just question your process, because this is not just a 2, 3, 4-year deal. The Jets have been bad for a pretty long time. And so you showed that list of potential head coaching candidates. Who wants to come to this situation? Who wants to inherit this infrastructure? That matters. That matters what kind of support a coach is going to get. It matters what is in place, not to mention the expiring contracts and what you have to work with there. So listen, I don't agree with the situation as a whole, from top to bottom to quarterback to everything, but it hasn't been handled well. There's ways to communicate to the outside world and then handle it behind the scenes. They don't even know how to communicate the public relations aspect, let alone the things within the building.
So lots of questions for Woody Johnson, but let's just imagine a world, right, where somehow they figure out the coaching situation. They get Hassan Reddick to actually enter the building, and then they go out and get Davante Adams, which he said this is a spot he would want to land at, get back with his former quarterback. How possible do you think that is? All of those things, but specifically Davante Adams. And if he does join the squad, how much does that really change the offense?
Listen, as a fit thing, the relationship he and Aaron Rodgers have on the field is special. We've seen Aaron Rodgers' body language and his frustration with his own communication style with receivers, these little very, very subtle hints at the line of scrimmage. Davante knows that language fluently. And so if there's anyone who could really make this offense tick the way Aaron wants it to tick, it's Davante Adams. But I just don't see a world where they have the money and the capital to make this work, even though it might make sense from a he and Aaron standpoint. I'm rooting for it just because I think that'll make them a contender in what seems like a pretty winnable division. But I just don't know if that's going to happen. I think the third-round pick that they've already dispelled for Hassan Reddick, who hasn't even gone to the catering, he hasn't even had a haircut in the building. He hasn't gotten his ankles taped in the building. I just don't know how you then go and make a deal for Davante Adams.
He's just burning millions of dollars with this holdout. I'll never.
You don't love the way Hassan Reddick has handled this. You've made that very clear. I respect it.
How could anyone really?
He's lost $10 million. All he had to do was show up and claim he has a hamstring injury like Davante Adams, and he keeps his money. Like
You're not wrong.
I don't understand this. And to your point, and I know we don't have much time here, organizations matter. Woody Johnson bought this team in 2000. Since 2001, here's the list of coaches that have had a winning record under Woody Johnson's ownership of the Jets. 0. How much does being a functioning organization matter in trying to win?
It's everything. And I talked about this when we were going through the coaching carousel this offseason with Bill Belichick. He probably wanted more control than a lot of organizations were willing to give. But also, he's looking at an organization where there are things in place where he can make things a winning culture in every aspect, from the nutrition to the strength staff to everything. And there's organizations, people will be shocked. This is the best league in the world. There are organizations that don't run like it's the best league in the world. And that absolutely matters, because the end product on the field is born from the small things you start to do in January, February, and March.
Yeah, take a look at how the Commanders have changed things now that the stench of Daniel Snyder has been removed. Competent leadership, competent coaching, and they're where they are. The good news about this, Marshall, we'll do this again on Monday because we got the Jets and the Bills in prime time.
Coming up, though, we've talked a lot about the trends that favor the Niners tonight. But if there's a path to victory for Seattle, it's through this man, Mike McDonald. Did he find the winning formula to making Brock Purdy look ugly? That's next on the Pregame PowerUp.
Pregame PowerUp is presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal.
here in Pregame PowerUp, presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal. With Robert Saleh cast off by the Jets, the guy under center for the Seahawks tonight is another gangrene that was cast off. Geno Smith spent 4 seasons with New York after being selected in the second round of the 2023 draft by the Jets. He spent 4 long seasons there before breaking free and finding a home in Seattle. Geno, now he's been a Seahawk actually longer than he's been a Jet, playing in his 43rd game with the team tonight against San Francisco. And the stats are better across the board. He even won Comeback Player of the Year in 2022, and he's been to 2 Pro Bowls. For more on Geno's journey of redemption, here's Emerson Lazio.
When you're a Jet all the way, unless you enjoy winning and stability. Take Geno Smith, for example, former Jet. His time in the Big Apple was rotten to the core. This dude received a full dose of dysfunction. He was booed, benched, and even beaten by a teammate, leaving him with a broken jaw. From there, he was wheels up throughout the league, layovers with the Giants and Chargers, before eventually touching down in Seattle in 2019. Following 3 seasons as a clipboard carrier, he takes over for an injured Russell Wilson, and since then has remained at cruising altitude. Let's take you to 2022, the year of the Genossance. See what we did there? He starts all 17 games. He throws for 30 touchdowns. He's a Pro Bowler. He's named the Comeback Player of the Year and finishes 9th in MVP voting.
They wrote me off. I ain't right back, though. That's the problem. I ain't right back. Let's go.
So that got us thinking. Who else has enjoyed newfound fame and success after their flight was delayed in New York? Boarding in Group A, this man right here, Bill Belichick, who famously handed in his resignation letter written on a cocktail napkin after spending just 1 day on board with the Jets, who he would end up tormenting twice a year for the next 2 decades, winning 6 Super Bowls with the Patriots along the way. Keyshawn Johnson has a premium seat on this flight. Yes, the former #1 overall pick recorded 2 Pro Bowl campaigns in New York, but it took a trade to Tampa to help him lift the Lombardi trophy. Turns out, when you throw him the damn ball, good things happen. Now we land on one of the greatest Jets of all time, Darrelle Revis, a perpetual All-Pro corner who led the Jets to back-to-back AFC title games but failed to elevate them to Super Bowl champion. That's when Revis Island was relocated, and his descent into New England turned out to be the title-winning high point on his journey. In 1976, the Jets run out of fuel once again when John Diesel Riggins leaves for greener pastures in our nation's capital, where the bruising tailback racked up 4 playoff appearances, finishing top 4 in MVP voting, and won the Super Bowl. New York's most recent frequent flyer, now racking up air miles and smiles elsewhere, is Sam Darnold. His Jets career was terribly turbulent. 13 wins, 25 losses. His biggest battle was against mono and seeing ghouls in Gotham.
Seeing ghosts.
'Tis but a rough patch in the sky. Since his days in a Jets uniform, Darnold has had a real altitude adjustment and is now under center for the undefeated Minnesota Vikings. Jets fans, earmuffs, Sam Darnold is an MVP candidate. So which former Jet will be next to find success after no longer being a Jet? We're looking at you, Robert Saleh, who was escorted out by Jet security on Tuesday morning in what will likely be the best move of his career. Because in life, 3 things are certain: death, taxes, and the Jets are gonna jet.
Yes, the Jets will jet. Thank you, Emerson. Taking a look at Geno's prop lines tonight, we mentioned he's been throwing a lot more, but the books think that's going to change tonight against the Niners. Lines are still set well below his season averages. For what it's worth, though, Geno and company have been putting up the points, 7th in the league in scoring. But Trey, the identity of this team and their new head coach this season was supposed to be defense.
Claudia, that is a factual statement because, as you well know, I know you know this, before he became the Seahawks head coach, Mike McDonald was the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. That's where he made his bones, much in the same way Robert Saleh made his bones as the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. So the defense looked great for Seattle when these were the quarterbacks they were playing. Bo Nix, Jacoby Brissett, and all of the Miami quarterbacks not named Tua Tagovailoa. However, if you go back and look at the Ravens defense when McDonald was leading against Brock Purdy, it looked pretty awful for Brock when he took on this Ravens squad. Let's just take a look at the numbers here. Go back to last Christmas where Purdy faced that McDonald's Ravens defense. Purdy threw a career-high 4 interceptions and had the worst passer rating ever. The 14-point loss was also tied for the worst of his career. Purdy remembers that game far too well and talked about going back and watching that film in that game in preparation for this game tonight.
The scheme is pretty similar, and how they call the plays and stuff looks similar. Obviously, the personnel and everything is different, and so we just got to know, obviously which guys to look out for in certain situations. Like I said, we're playing a whole new personnel in the Seahawks, and so should be a little bit different in that regard, just playing different players. But when it comes to scheme versus scheme, it was good to watch the game last year against Baltimore, and so it was good.
I'm sure it wasn't great. Here are the props for tonight for Purdy. Passing yards, 252.5, completions, 19.5, and pass attempts, 30.5. And, Claudia, when you look at the way things are going, you really could break down Purdy's entire season so far this year. Which half are we looking at? Because in the first half, 5 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. It goes the exact opposite way in the second half. Only 1 throw for a touchdown and 4 interceptions.
Yeah, and I mean, you can bet the first half of the full game as well at the DraftKings Sportsbook. We have a specific market for that because the Niners, as a team, have won the first half in 8 of the last 10 away games. First half, and get them at -2.5, so that's a possible play as well. Brock Purdy, though, you mentioned those numbers. They're down from where they opened, 251.5 yards, 20.5 completions, 31.5 pass attempts. So some under money has been coming in for a reason.
All right, we'll see how that plays out. Meanwhile, for more on this game and how it's going to work out, let's go back to the DraftKings floor in Las Vegas and welcome in a former NFL wide receiver and also works for VSiN, now Mike Pritchard. Mike, let's talk about your thoughts on what you've seen out of Geno. We've never had a Seahawks quarterback lead the league in passing before, in passing yards, yet Geno is leading the league in almost everything right now.
Yeah, he is, Trey. I mean, he's off to a great start. I think Ryan Grubb, the new offensive coordinator, comes from college, right? And he's got all these weapons, 11 personnel with Smith and Jigba, Lockett, and certainly DK Metcalf. Even Walker out of the backfield, but Geno is entirely comfortable with this offense, with his style. Go back to that West Virginia. He had a wide open style of offense as well, and that got him drafted into the National Football League. So he's going back to his roots a little bit, throwing the rock. I mean, they're throwing it almost 70% of the time when you break down their play selection. So Geno is making some plays out there. They just got to be more consistent, though. But Geno's off to a great start.
Yeah, and a lot of those throws are deep balls to his guy, DK. Over 200 yards on go routes right now for him, most in the NFL by a wide margin. But it's interesting to look at this matchup specifically. The Niners' weakness is defending the slot, Mike, allowing a league high almost 14 yards per attempt. So how do you expect Seattle to adjust to that heading into this?
Claudia, they have a great slot receiver in Smith and Jigba. He did that at Ohio State. Certainly, he's comfortable there. Lockett can also play in there. I've seen some movement, too, on the offensive side of the ball with formations, moving DK around a little bit. But he's primarily an outside-the-numbers type of guy. He's 6'4", 235, and runs a 4.3. I mean, you want to throw him the ball vertically if you can because there's a lot of mismatches out there. And I think DK is due for a big game because I talked about the inconsistency a little bit. If you go back to his performances, week 1 was down, week 2 was up, week 3 was down, week 4 was up, and then last week it was down against the Giants. So I think he's due for a big game against a familiar opponent tonight.
Well, if you look at a familiar opponent, it's curious how Brock Purdy is approaching this, right? We heard him talk about going back and looking at that game on Christmas night where he had one of the worst performances of his career against the McDonald's scheme. But these are completely different players here in Seattle, Mike. Right. So how much can he glean from that? Because, the old saying is it about the X's and O's or about the Willies and Joes?
Yeah, right. I mean, the players that the Ravens had last year were phenomenal.
Pretty good.
Phenomenal again this year. Pretty good. Seattle is trying to figure it out, though. There's a lot of breakdown in assignments. They're still trying to figure out this new defense, right? This new scheme. And then Rick Woolen is hurt, too. So that's a guy that you would love to have on the back end to kind of pair up with that defense and what they want to do out there with that personnel. So, if you're Brock, you understand the scheme, you understand the tendencies, you understand what McDonald wants to do against you, but understand that you're familiar with those players more so than really McDonald is at this point. So be confident with what you know. Be confident that you have the best play caller in the National Football League in Kyle Shanahan. And then just be confident at quarterback position and avoid those 4 interceptions like he had against the Ravens.
Mike, I always like to ask you, I know you say you're a big dog better. Last week you strayed away from that, and that boded well for you with the Chiefs. The public, the Sharps, everybody is on the Niners tonight. So which way are you going?
I'm going back to the dogs, Claudia. I got to. I can do so many things betting with the dog situation, but here's where I love Seattle. San Francisco's old. They're one of the oldest rosters. They have more players at the age of 30 than most teams in the National Football League, if not all the teams in the National Football League. So, and they're key players too, right? Trent Williams, Juszczyk. You got these key players that really they're going to rely on a short week in a season that's a marathon, right? I think both teams overlooked their opponents last week, let down games as they both had that loss. And now we're going to get the best shot. But I think at home with Seattle, with that energy and the age difference that I see out there on the field, San Francisco has been wearing down in the second half as well. So I like the Seahawks with the points at home.
It didn't worry you at all, though, losing to a Giants squad that didn't have their 2 best players through the air or on the ground, Mike?
Well, it should worry me, right? I mean, it doesn't, though. I think each and every game, the snowflake is so different. They lost that, block field goal, which was incredible. But, yeah, I think Seattle, they've shown their capability and how powerful they can be and prolific they can be against Detroit, right? They haven't put it together defensively. That's why, even though it's got bet up in terms of the total, I'm inclined to look at betting the total over as well. But I like the Seattle Seahawks at home with the points.
All right, Mike, thanks very much. We'll see how it plays out. Mike, back on the dogs tonight, and the Seahawks are 3.5 home dogs as they welcome in San Francisco.
Yeah, and like I mentioned to Mike, the public confident in the Niners tonight to cover and on the money line. The Sharps, the public, almost an exact split on the game total, which he just talked about. Saw some over money there. And a prop everybody's on is Debo to go over on his receiving yards prop. 99% of the bets, Trey, on that over. He's eclipsed 100 yards in 5 of 7 games in his career against Seattle. The current line, only 54.5. For more on where money is coming in at the DraftKings Sportsbook, let's bring in our anonymous informant, Captain Book.
It's Thursday night, and an NFC West battle kicks off Week 6 in the NFL. San Francisco sits at 2-3, but that hasn't stopped big bettors from putting their piggy banks on the 49ers in this spot. Sure, this game opened 4 back in May, and even sat at 5 for months over the summer. But when it reopened at 3 last week, VIP gold diggers went gaga, picking off San Fran -3, jackhammering the Niners money line to boot. With all that hot smash action on Shanahan's squad, why's the book been so stingy and now stuck on 3.5? Mike Mack is the new man running the show in Seattle, and last season his Baltimore D put creative Kyle in an angry chair, stacking their big men in the box while picking off Purdy 4 times en route to a 33-19 smackdown. So the wisest guys out here are grabbing Geno plus the points, and the captain is certainly on board with that. It's over now, Niners. Hey, Emerald City, let's go!
And on Seattle.
All in on Seattle. Well, that's what they need because everybody has bet the Niners, yeah.
Sometimes you just got to roll those dice and hope they go your way.
We'll see. Mike's confident in him. I don't know, though. With all those defensive injuries.
So many injuries. And
yeah.
I just can't see San Francisco dropping 3 straight division games to start the season.
Big problems if so.
Yeah. All right, when we come back, George Kittle has found the end zone in 3 straight games, but who do bettors like to find bait dirt tonight? And it's time for our, wait for it, our data-inclined feline. Pick the first touchdown score in tonight's game. Next-gen Cats. What we're looking at is Jordan Mason, Kenneth Walker, Kittle, DeKalin Zacharias Metcalf, and
sniffing around.
Passing on DK.
Kittle.
No. He went with DK.
He duped us. He fooled us.
Smith and Jigba last week when he fooled the Giants defenders. That's what the Cat did.
There we go. Thanks,
somehow
Cat.
It all goes back to football.
Next-gen Cats, baby.
Pregame Power Up is presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal.
Claudia and Trey back with you on the pregame Power Up. Boom. Presented by Campbell's Chunky, soup that eats like a meal. Here's who bettors like to score tonight. Jordan Mason, the most bet anytime touchdown scorer. You gotta lay some juice for that, though. Despite having 3 straight games with a touchdown, George Kittle, this is weird, is actually the most bet player to not find the end zone tonight.
That don't make no sense.
I don't know what's wrong with people, and that's juice too. Y'all are crazy. Here's DKN social media correspondent Megan Townsley with the latest from the DK Sportsbook betting groups.
Okay, here's the deal. The Seahawks and the 49ers both need a bounce back win tonight after their performances in week 5. So I'm curious to see who people are backing in the DraftKings Sportsbook betting groups. Let's start with the DK Network betting group where Kieran Doyle, he's trusting Geno Smith tonight. He likes Geno to hit over 200 plus passing yards, but he's also parlaying that with the Niners spread alternate at -3, which scares me because the Niners have lost 2 divisional matchups already and even won by 1 point. But as we've seen in an NFC West matchup like this, anything can happen. Okay, let's go to the Barstool betting group where Rico Bosco is taking my favorite player on the 49ers, George Kittle, to score a touchdown. I love this bet because if anyone loves a good rivalry, it is George Kittle. You've seen him wear the undershirt saying some mean things about the Cowboys, but tonight I love him to hit pay dirt. And if you also want to tail this bet, go ahead and open up the DraftKings Sportsbook, click on the social tab at the top, and then you'll find the betting groups button. No, because honestly, this matchup is one of my favorites every season, and you can let bettors know who you're backing by tailing some of these bets or placing ones of your own in the DraftKings Sportsbook betting groups.
So the people are split on Kittle, but not this guy. Somebody put $1,000 on Kittle to be the first touchdown scorer to pay $10,500.
Did they not see Next Gen Cats?
Come on, people!
Next Gen Cats has been nailing it.
It really has. I know.
Absolutely nailing it.
That is true.
Keep this in mind, okay? Look, I get it that the 49ers have sort of stumbled their way through the start of the season. They've been a little banged up. They know how to play this team.
Yes.
Okay, Brock Purdy has never lost, even though wins and losses are not a quarterback stat. I will die on that hill. I will die on that hill. Brock Purdy in his career, when he starts, the team is 4-0. In fact, let's take it one step further. They've won 5 straight games against the Seattle Seahawks. And you look at the numbers, it's ridiculous. They've outscored them 148-72. Sometimes they're just bad matchups. And I get it. It's a new coach. It's a new era. I totally understand that this does include playoffs. But we talked about it so much, and you brought it up earlier in the show. With so many of those injured Seattle defenders out there, it just seems like this is the game where San Francisco can again say, look, we've owned this division for the last few years outside of 2020 when we had a bunch of injuries. Let's go. It's like that social media post. If you go to prison, establish dominance early. Let's establish dominance early.
I've never seen that.
You've never seen that? It's one of the greatest things. His mother is telling her kids, don't add to the population, don't decrease from the population, don't end up in the hospital or in jail. But if you do end up in jail, establish dominance early. Oh. One of the greatest go out, have a good time advices I've ever had in my life. It's absolutely fantastic.
You learn something new every day. But you're completely right when it comes down to it. Simple football. The Niners have more players healthy, and I think just better all around. The fact that they're healthier, they have Kittle back, they have Debo, they have Ayuk. All of them. Brock Purdy has been seeing a lot of pressure, but if they can protect him, take advantage of these defensive injuries, they should be just fine. To win by a field goal, yes, you have that hook, so a little bit more. They should get that done.
Well, I mean, and again, you look at the quarterbacks that Seattle has faced. When they faced a really good quarterback in Jared Goff, they put up 42 points on him, okay?
Yeah.
And Brock Purdy is a very capable. He's one of those polarizing guys in the NFL that I don't quite understand. Oh, Brock Purdy's just a system quarterback. He's just doing what he's supposed to do. That's what every quarterback is supposed to do.
Yeah.
And when you do what you're supposed to do and lead to points, that's literally the entire job. It's literally the entire job. And I think with those deficiencies, he can get it done tonight, and the Niners can finally get that first division win.
Yeah. All we're going to hear about, though, is Brock Purdy the guy? Should they get rid of Brock Purdy if they lose tonight? It's not a Brock Purdy problem, people. It goes beyond that. If they
Turnovers and injuries, the problems for the San Francisco 49ers. We'll see what happens tonight. Enjoy the showdown. For Claudia, Marshall, Emerson, Mike Lombardi, Mike Pritchard, everybody else involved, Pike, the camera guy. I'm Trey Wingo. Thanks for watching Pregame Power. Have a good night.